while others set up their stalls in busy markets. This shoeshine boy insisted on positioning his right outside a bank. This way, all his customers were business tycoons. Each time, he deliberately worked slowly and meticulously, just to overhear more of the financial secrets the wealthy discussed. After a customer left, he would jot down what he heard in a notebook, all because he wanted to become a banker. And this financial knowledge was the key to his dream. But his father sadly advised him that it was impossible, because a black man doing business in those times could be sentenced to death. Yet the boy's eyes still held a determined glint. Time flew by. 15 years later, Charlie moved with his wife to Los Angeles. Because big cities held slightly less discrimination against black people, he decided to start his business there. Thanks to his keen business sense, he quickly spotted an opportunity. There was a high vacancy rate in white neighborhoods, while black neighborhoods were overcrowded. So, he decided to start in real estate, specifically buying houses in white areas and renting them to affluent black families. Soon, he set his sights on a white apartment building adjacent to a black neighborhood. Though it looked dilapidated and overgrown with weeds, this building was right next to the black area. But when he approached the owner to negotiate, the asking price was $35,000, and Charlie had only $30,000 in savings. He proposed paying a down payment first, with the balance due after he rented out the units. Although the owner admired his business acumen, he didn't want to take risky deals and politely declined. Just as Charlie was about to leave, he accidentally noticed a calendar, gifted by a bank manager. A flash of inspiration struck him. He went to the bank featured on the calendar, but right at the reception desk, he faced discrimination. Left with no choice, Charlie waited patiently outside until the manager finished work. Charlie claimed he was referred by the property owner and hoped to secure a $5,000 loan to complete the deal. But in the end, he was refused. Just as Charlie was losing hope, the property owner called. However, he wasn't angry about Charlie using his name without permission. Instead, he was impressed by Charlie's courage and intelligence. Not only did he agree to sell the building to Charlie, but he also offered to be his loan guarantor. Charlie was so moved he wept with joy. His persistence had finally paid off. And so, Charlie took out a loan and bought his first property. But just as he was preparing to renovate, he faced opposition from an elderly tenant.
"This is a white building. You can't own this place."
After her outburst, the old woman stormed back into her room. Not long after, the police showed up at the door. The old woman had reported that a black man was impersonating the landlord, but Charlie was prepared for this. He presented the purchase contract he carried with him for the police to verify. Even after checking it multiple times, they still couldn't believe that this building actually belonged to a black man. In the end, they had no choice but to leave. When the old woman learned Charlie truly was the owner, she was so furious she moved out the very next day, unwilling to live in the same building as a black person. Once she was gone, however, Charlie rented the unit to a black woman. As expected, the rental market had limitless potential. Charlie, as promised, paid the remaining balance to the white owner. The owner, deeply impressed by Charlie, proposed they go into business together. The owner would handle signing contracts publicly, while Charlie worked behind the scenes managing rentals. This way, white people wouldn't know they were dealing with a black partner. Such an opportunity was rare, and Charlie immediately agreed. Their partnership went smoothly, and they soon made a fortune. But life is never smooth sailing for long. Not long after, the older partner suddenly passed away from illness. All company shares were inherited by his widow. This woman harbored severe racial prejudice. Not only did she force Charlie to vacate the villa he lived in, but she also tried to buy out his half of the shares at a lowball price. Charlie naturally refused to give up his shares, but the woman threatened to take him to court. A lawyer sympathetically told Charlie that a black man had no chance against a white person in court. Moreover, he had always worked behind the scenes. No one could prove he was a partner, but the power of life lies in defiance. He decided to find the original bank manager. Only he could prove Charlie's partnership with the owner, but the manager had already become the financial advisor to the owner's wife and refused to meet with him. Yet Charlie still refused to yield. He looked around and conceived a bold idea. If he could buy the office building that housed 7 banks, then those banks would become his tenants. This way, they would never dare refuse his applications again. So, Charlie sought out George, a black real estate entrepreneur, and laid out his entire acquisition plan. But George was dumbfounded after hearing it. That was the most expensive building in Los Angeles, and the owner was white. Trying to buy their property on their own turf was sheer fantasy. Charlie didn't argue immediately. Instead, he calmly stated his reasons for the acquisition. The building housed 7 major banks. Buying it would not only secure bank loans, but also allow him to monitor real estate trends at any time. More crucially, through his investigations, he discovered that the building was in a prime location, but the owner only wanted to rent offices to prestigious, large white companies. However, these large companies usually had their own headquarters, so their leasing demand wasn't high. Consequently, a significant number of offices in this building remained vacant. This meant the owner not only had limited rental income, but also bore heavy operational costs. Charlie presented various data he had calculated to prove to George that, no matter what, this was a guaranteed profitable venture. George was utterly stunned after hearing this. He realized Charlie wasn't a mere dreamer, but had thought everything through carefully. Cooperating with a rational person like him surely wouldn't result in loss. But they faced one major problem. Because of their race, if they approached directly, the owner would certainly flat out refuse. So, they needed a white person to represent them. Ultimately, Charlie chose Matthew, who had helped him with renovations. Although he was just an ordinary handyman, he harbored ambitions. Most importantly, he wasn't prejudiced against black people. He just lacked some experience. So, the next day, Charlie and George George began training Matthew comprehensively. They didn't just teach him finance and negotiation skills, they personally coached him in golf and dining etiquette. After 3 months of training, Matthew lived up to their expectations. Although he couldn't fully grasp all the financial knowledge, his memory was exceptional. When he couldn't understand terms or formulas, he simply memorized them by rote. Combined with the talent he displayed on the golf course, no one would have guessed he was once just a handyman. When it came time to approach the building's owner, Matthew truly amazed everyone. With one impressive swing, he earned the owner's respect and successfully secured a negotiation opportunity. But Matthew had no confidence about the negotiation itself. Charlie, however, was full of confidence. He had already calculated in advance all the potentially relevant data. Matthew only needed to memorize a series of numbers. No matter how much the owner tried to raise the price, Matthew could always respond quickly, accurately citing specific figures. This greatly astonished the owner, leaving even the professional accountant present feeling inadequate. And so, a building originally priced at $2.4 million was successfully acquired for only $1.56 million. With banks as his backing, Charlie's real estate business grew bigger and bigger. He not only broke racial barriers in Los Angeles, but also promoted community integration, enabling black families to move into white neighborhoods. His achievements even earned him a meeting with the vice president. But this didn't satisfy Charlie. He returned to his hometown in Texas with capital and ideals. His father was amazed by his son's accomplishments, but he still forbade Charlie from doing business in Texas, simply because the discrimination there wasn't something one person could change. But Charlie, just like when he was a boy, didn't heed the advice. He decided first to acquire the Continental Bank in Texas, the very place where he had shined shoes as a child. But George firmly opposed this after hearing it, because Texas was different from Los Angeles. A black man caught doing business there could end up in prison. But Charlie wouldn't listen at all. He grabbed the contract, ready to attempt the acquisition alone. George could see his mind was made up, and had no choice but to agree to join him in this risk. Perhaps a true friend isn't someone who applauds your success, but someone who stands by your side even when they know it's dangerous. This time, they again had Matthew represent them, while George disguised himself as a driver to observe from the shadows. But an unexpected issue arose midway. To protect his son's job, the bank owner would only sell 80% of the shares. This meant there would still be a white man among the bank's top executives, preventing Charlie from appearing publicly. But the contract was already signed. Charlie could only work behind the scenes, providing loans to black clients. Although he couldn't operate openly, Charlie was still changing his hometown in his own way. However, no secret stays hidden forever. One day, the owner's son suddenly confronted Matthew, demanding to know why the number of loans that month had increased by 70 compared to usual. Flustered, Matthew saying it was to expand business and increase shareholder profits. But the young man wasn't easily fooled. He secretly followed several borrowers and discovered they were all black. Meanwhile, Matthew sensed the situation was serious and met with Charlie late at night to discuss countermeasures. Unbeknownst to them, the owner's son had followed them, quietly taking photos of their meeting. The next day, the young man went to Charlie's home, threatening Charlie to hand over his bank shares, or he would report him to the authorities. Even if Charlie had photos with the vice president, it wouldn't matter in the state of Texas. Charlie refused to yield, and angrily chased him away. He was certain the young man wouldn't dare report him, because the bank also held 20% of his shares. Reporting would mean mutual destruction, but he underestimated the depth of the other's racial prejudice. That same day, the bank received an audit notice. Matthew then suggested acquiring a small bank, and transferring the Continental Bank's loan business there. But actually, Matthew had his own agenda. His rapid rise in status had drastically inflated his ambitions. Matthew no longer wanted to be Charlie's puppet. He wanted a bank he could control himself. This was also the reward Charlie had once promised him, but Matthew had only been involved with banking for 3 months. Charlie didn't believe he had the ability to manage alone.
I can't become my own man here, then I think I need to resign and go back to LA.
Is this you blackmailing us?
No, that's not fair, Joe. You guys have taught me so much. I just want to be more like you. An owner.
Seeing how determined he was, Charlie finally decided to acquire a bank. He didn't want to disappoint Matthew, nor did he want Continental Bank to go bankrupt. Although they successfully deceived the auditors this time, due to Matthew's severe lack of management skills, he completely let employees approve loans unchecked, leading to a serious out-of-control of the loan amount. A loan originally for $100,000 was issued as $1 million. Problems at the bank quickly surfaced. The auditors notified them of an inspection the next day. Panicked, Matthew could only turn to Charlie for help, but Charlie couldn't enter the bank directly. Fortunately, his wife had once worked as a cleaner at a bank. She suggested Charlie disguise himself as a janitor to sneak in. Every time the auditor asked a question, Matthew would excuse himself to go to the restroom, to consult Charlie in the bathroom, and Charlie could quickly provide specific figures. But after several trips back and forth, Charlie realized something was wrong. Each loan was a mess of accounts. Nothing like normal lending business. It seemed more like a trap set for them. The first page lacked individual loan limits, total loan amounts, or repayment terms.
They didn't lie. They just hid the shit in the averages.
How the hell did our lawyer miss that?
It turned out Matthew's lawyer had been recommended by the owner's son. He was the one who tampered with the contract. His goal was to ruin Charlie and George at any cost. This was a dead end. They had to abandon Matthew's bank to save Continental Bank from being implicated. But Matthew's wife refused to give up. If her husband lost the bank, he would become just a worker again. So, she tricked Matthew into merging the two banks, thinking there might still be a sliver of hope. Matthew listened to his wife, leading to a major disaster the very next day. Charlie and George, disregarding their identity as black men, angrily stormed into Matthew's office.
It's just temporary.
It's fraud.
No, if we classify them differently.
If you keep this up, you're gonna sink both banks, Matt.
Meanwhile, bank auditors had already arrived at the bank and announced the revocation of the bank's business license for fraud. Continental Bank was officially seized. Watching his years of work vanish into nothing, Charlie couldn't accept this outcome. Why do people talk of freedom, yet their words are full of chains? He tried to argue with the auditor, but the other threatened to detain him. Charlie questioned the auditor, asking which specific law he had violated. Was a black man doing business deserving of death? Unfortunately, respect comes at a high price. His skin color had already predetermined the outcome of today. In the end, Charlie and George were arrested. That night, the auditor promised Matthew that if he testified against Charlie and George in court, he could avoid prison time. Matthew was instantly torn. In the past, Charlie had always been there to strategize. Now, he felt like a child who had lost his support, unsure how to choose. Ultimately, Matthew shifted all the blame onto Charlie and the others. This was hard for Charlie to accept from the defendant's seat. Now he faced two choices: either admit defeat and leave Texas, or tell the truth in court and accept the tragic fate of imprisonment. The night before the trial, the auditor came to threaten Charlie. No matter how the auditor threatened, Charlie still refused to give in. Soon, the day of the trial arrived. Charlie refuted the prosecutor's charges. Why did they hide their identities? Because this society never allowed them to exist as their true selves. Then Charlie held up that work uniform representing his behind-the-scenes identity, condemned all the various injustices suffered by black people. Charlie knew he would lose everything because of this, but at this moment, he felt an inexplicable sense of liberation. He wasn't defending himself. He was speaking for an entire oppressed race.
Turn it off. Remove the whistle. Why is it so important to you to exclude an entire race of people from the American dream?
After the hearing concluded, Charlie and George's assets were all confiscated, and they were sentenced to 3 years in prison for violating regulations. On the day Charlie was released from prison, his wife and George had been waiting outside for a long time. Even though he now had nothing, his wife still stood by him unwaveringly. Perhaps in an ordinary, long marriage, sharing both joy and hardship is the best testament to love. Later, Charlie and George joined forces again in the Bahamas, and once more became leading real estate developers. When injustice and prejudice stand like high walls blocking dreams, when discrimination and arrogance bind freedom like chains, there will always be those who choose to dance on the cliff of fate. They know the road ahead is perilous, yet press forward with determination. They understand that to reach for the stars, one must grow amidst the storm.